Hi Constant Readers, my name is Emily. This video is a part of my #DT Project 17. This is a reading project in which I read the Dark Tower series by Stephen King because I've never read them before. This is a mini-sode, it's not really part of the series and it's not part of my scheduled reading list. Information on the reading project and any affiliated groups will be linked in the description box down below. Today I wanted to respond to some of the comments that I've been getting. So part of my aim with this project is to use my university degrees in English literary criticism to sort of look at the series in terms of how it fits in with my research interests. So I am interested in fantasy literature and how fantasy literature, the literature of subversion according to Rosemary Jackson, has potential to really play with our expectations. For this reading project, I am looking at the series and how it fits into or subverts fantasy literature. I've also put a disclaimer at the front of all of my videos saying that I don't care about authorial intentions, the author is dead. At which point many of you in the comments raised your hands and said, Emily, Stephen King is very much alive. What do you mean the author is dead? Today I'm going to be responding to that question, sort of explaining my position based on my education. So let's hop right into it. So when I say the author is dead, I don't mean that Stephen King, the writer, is dead. I know that Stephen King, the human being, the writer of the series that I am reading, is very much alive. I've seen his Twitter feed. At least he's alive as of February 22nd, 2017, in around 9 a.m. in the morning. If something were to change, I can't speak to that. But as of this moment, when I am recording, Stephen King, the writer, is alive. Obviously, I don't mean that Stephen King himself is dead. What I mean is that the capital A author is dead in sort of the new literary criticism that started in the 1960s. I was taught literary criticism at two Canadian universities, the University of Western Ontario and McMaster University in Ontario, so I can't speak to all English programs, but across these two programs during my bachelor's and my master's, we were taught that the author is dead. We don't care about biographical information or any of that. What we care about is what the text says. And that idea stems from the 1967 essay Death of the Author by Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes argued against literary criticism's practice of incorporating biographical details into the interpretation and analysis of a text. Barthes argues that the writing and the creator are unrelated. Once a writer has birthed this work into the world, it stands as a completely separate being, and the author has no control once the text stands separate over how you interpret it. What is important for Barthes is that the work stands apart from the author. Barthes' idea of the death of the author is also in conversation with the questioning of the self as a stable identity. Are you really the same person you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 minutes ago? You're always learning and changing. So to say that yourself is a stable, constant, unchanging thing is a bit of a falsehood in this new idea of criticism. Even the author isn't the self that they were. The author can't know themselves. They can try and remember themselves, but they can't know themselves in that past moment. So to say that you are the same person who wrote it back then is false. We are always learning and changing, and our experiences are always reshaping our idea of self in the present. To give a text a capital A author is to assign a singular interpretation to it. If you make the capital A author the authority over that text's meaning, nobody else can ever infer anything from it. And that doesn't really make for good literature, it doesn't make for good conversation, it doesn't make for good criticism. Barthes challenges us to think of the author more as a scripter than as the authority over a text. In my education, I was taught that to do a biographical reading is to attempt to detect what the author intended while writing a text, which is an impossibility. It is the text itself as it stands that speaks to readers. So with the death of the author in mind, something that really got hammered home to me during my master's degree is being careful about authorial intention. So when you attribute something to the author opposed to the text that you are reading. So I had a CanLit class in which we had to do presentations analyzing a piece of Canadian fiction. One group had to do this presentation on a story in which a dog is found with a stick that looks like a table leg or maybe a peg leg in its mouth. So this group analyzed the story, they offered an interpretation based on the text, and they offered meaning based on what they saw in the text. Now the kicker is that the CanLit community is fairly small and at least of a certain generation, and my professor brought in her friend who happened to write the piece. And so the friends sat through the presentation, and then the group had an opportunity to ask the author what they thought, and the author was like, I didn't put any of that meaning in there. I didn't intend any of that. I just thought it would be a funny story. So the difference between authorial intention when they write something and the meaning that a reader can draw based on the words in the text that exists as a separate entity can be very different. This has Stephen King's name on it because he wrote the words inside it. The words themselves are what I have to interact with. They stand alone, unattached to their creator, and they speak to me. So because the capital A author is dead in the type of literary criticism I was taught, the author has no authority over my reading of the text. All of this ties back to my refusal to read King's introductions to the text. So at the beginning of the series, at some point, I said that I wouldn't be reading King's updated author's notes. So King does this throughout his works. When something gets republished, he writes you a little blurb talking about like his headspace and reflecting on the story and offering insight. And I said for this series that I would not be reading any of those. I would not be taking into account King's reflections on his own writing because I don't care about authorial intent for all of the reasons I have stated in this video. I don't care what present King has to offer in terms of his own analysis of his text. I am here to read as a first-timer and to analyze as a first-timer. Maybe one day when I reread the series, I'll go for King's notes. I'll read some of King's notes, but for now, I don't want to know what King was intending. I want to read and see what the text says to me as a text, as it stands alone. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for participating and for tagging me on Instagram. I'm going to include a couple of beautiful photos that I've seen on Instagram here. Thank you so much for watching, constant readers, and I will see you very soon with my thoughts on The Drawing of Three. Bye.